Hey everyone, welcome back to brand new Take Game podcast. This week I have Arron Bleise on. Arron is a fellow podcaster as well who hosts his own show called The Fall Podcast. You might have seen Arron as well on the Kiefer Brothers show, Hambino. Arron just shot, or I should say last season, a great buck in Iowa called the Great Hambino. In this podcast we cover everything that went down in that hunt, from all the encounters with big bucks that Arron hunted all week to making critical decisions on when to move, when not to move, and so on. And being a fellow Michiganders, we talk about some origin stuff hunting-wise and what it meant to go out to Iowa and chase some of the Iowa giants out there. But it's a great podcast. Thanks to Arron. Make sure you check this out on YouTube, and hopefully you guys enjoy. We'll see you next week. All right, boys and girls, we are live, brand new Take Game podcast, and excited this week to have Arron Bleise on from the Kiefer Brothers show, Hambino. And Arron, man, just excited to catch up with you yet again.
Yeah, I'm excited as well. Thank you for having me on. It's a little bit of sigh of relief and maybe I don't know, it's just fun getting on these to do. I mean, we're in quarantine and crazy stuff going on right now, so I'm down in the basement and trying to clean up some stuff right now. So glad to be on, man. Yeah,
for sure. You know, it's a crazy time for us, and Arron's a fellow Michigander, and we were actually just talking offline about turkey hunting, so super excited about that for him. And for me, it starts tomorrow, and but really excited to talk about the episode I watched of the buck you killed in Iowa called the Great Hambino. But I know we have a lot to talk about, actually. But, man, what an awesome buck and an awesome episode. I was super excited to watch it, and just kind of the feeling of being a Michigan guy and knowing what it's like to put in those points and just everything about it. I mean, we love Michigan, but, man, we dream of Iowa, and it's just kind of, Arron, I'm sure you can speak to it, just kind of truly special when you know you're getting close to drawing that tag and saying, I'm out of here.
Yeah, it is. I mean, the whole Michigan thing, it's, you know, a lot of people probably from PA and probably Wisconsin, you know, those three states, I feel like they kind of go hand in hand, like with tradition and how a lot of people were brought up. But like I've said it before, and, you know, growing up in Michigan and, you know, being a young boy and just thinking and watching, you know, hunting shows on TV and stuff growing up, like the Real Trees and the Primos and stuff like that. It's like, you know, Iowa was always like a dream, but I never really thought it was something that could have been obtainable. I mean, you know, I never really thought probably back then that I would be doing what I am doing now for a job. And, but it's like you watch these people, the Lee and Tiffany's and the Drurys and, you know, guys like that are doing crazy things and just getting after and harvesting these huge deer year after year. And it's just a dream. And honestly, you know, 3-4 years ago, I started putting in for points, and the tag process was kind of funny. I didn't even realize I was going to draw the tag for this last year, because I was supposed to only put in for a point, and they actually put me in for a tag. And when the tag came, it said, you're granted an archery tag. So I said, okay, well, I guess I'm going this year. So
that's decisive, yeah.
It was kind of a surprise.
Yeah, that's really cool. I know that, I mean, for some of us, majority of us, you know, we wait years, we take it really serious. I've been to Iowa twice, and just in preparation for this. So tell me a little bit about, like, your preparation, Arron, and how kind of all that went down on where you're going to end up hunting and how well you pre-scouted and what tools that you actually used to scout in that manner. I mean, did you go out early season, start with shed hunting? Just kind of run me through the program.
You know, I've been out to the area where I, you know, was going to hunt for the last 4 or 5 years. You know, filming Chris and Casey and everything, and Casey's hunted there. I mean, I've been with these guys, working with them for 8 years now, so I think he's been there 3 times. So him and I have been there 3 times, you know, once with a bow and I think twice with a gun, I believe. So, you know, I've been out there. I know the farms. We actually, one of Chris and Casey's best friends, Chad Johnson, he owns an outfitter out there called Midwest Antler Company, and we've, I've got to know Chad and his family and his wife Jamie and kids really well over the last 5 or 6 years. And basically what Chad does is he just, gives us a place to crash, and, we go and get a lease somewhere, and then he can, he helps us out a lot, just with stands and doing a little inventory, because, we're 12, 13 hours from him, so it's a little different to try to just go over there for a quick weekend. So he, we got to give a lot of kudos for him, because he does do a lot of work for my preparation, everything going out there. And I'm editing TV shows in the summer, so it's really hard for me to get away and having a family and everything. So he really helped out a lot. But the preseason stuff, it was, I had to go and do a project. I had to film on the west side of the state of Iowa for a project the first week of October. So I was only going to be like 2 hours from Chad. So Casey flew in after I got done filming, and him and I went over to Chad's and hunted for the first week of October. And we hunted a couple farms. I ended up shooting a doe, and I shot a coyote. And, I was just trying to get my feet wet and just, possibly maybe like, have one of those big deer come by. And when we got there, we have the farm that I ended up killing the Hambino on is actually a farm we've been looking at for the last 4 or 5 years, just have never been able to get permission. And this year it ended up happening, and it paid dividends, and it was just pretty cool. And I got Chad to owe for that too. He helped out a lot on that front, just because I couldn't be there either, me or Casey.
So Arron, what exactly about that farm the past 4 or 5 years had you guys noticed and kind of keyed on that, like, hey, this piece of ground we really need?
So that farm in particular, it was in the middle of a section that, for a lot of people that might be listening to this from Michigan and, and Ohio and stuff like that, like the roads out there are not like mile sections like they are in Michigan. Everywhere you go, it's like a mile or a half-mile section. Sections out there, it looks like it just like you threw a dart at the wall and then like, oh, let's put a road here, and it's just kind of, there's a road here. It might be like a mud 2-track or, that's just kind of how it is. This farm kind of sat in the middle of a section, and it was kind of the hub, the epicenter, if you will, and it had a big, I call it a spine, a big spine of timber, a ditch. If you can kind of picture the farm kind of gradually going down, like on both sides, like kind of a ravine in a way, and then it had a lot of fingers of timber coming off of that. And what that spine was connecting was a big bedding area on the neighbors to a lot of food on the other neighbors. So bedding to the west and food on the east. So we were like right in the middle. And we were looking at this farm for, like I said, 5 years or so. And, we've hunted farms around there, and it was just like, man, if we could get on this farm, we think we could get a lot of deer that are cruising, from their bedding, because we can get tight to bedding and we can get tight to food, and just vice versa. And ultimately, once we got on there and started hunting a little bit, that's basically what happened, really. That's, the movement we were seeing.
Right. Well, that's pretty cool. It's neat that you guys had, very seldom does it work out that way, that you're like, man, I wish I could get on that piece, and then eventually it happens, and then to unfold into this story that you're telling.
Yeah, yep, it really is. And, I don't think it was one of those pieces. It wasn't one of those pieces when we looked at it in the past where it was like, if we can get on this farm, we'll, get after a giant. But it was like one of those farms that were like, if we could get on here, there's going to be a ton of deer, and we're going to be able to see and have an opportunity at a good one. Not saying we're going to go in and just get after the first 200-inch deer ever, or something, if that makes sense. It was just, we knew there was a lot of deer using it, and we knew that that farm had not been hunted in a long time, so it was virtually untouched.
Yeah, which is really, obviously, that is something you always love when you find a farm that it hasn't been hunted. And because the pressure is going to be low, obviously, but it also sounds like, from what you're describing of that piece, it sounds like it was kind of just the intersection, or a hub, so to speak, of others existing properties around it.
Exactly. Yep. There was some food on it, not a ton. And that was kind of how we got into the farm is the farmer that rents the farming rights to it hasn't been able to harvest crops off of that farm for 2 or 3 years because the deer just decimate it. He's got beans on there and they wouldn't get over 5 inches. And it's the deer density on this farm is just ridiculous. So that was kind of how we were ultimately ended up to be able to land it, is to be able to take some deer off of it and just so that farmer could turn a crop on it. And I mean, we helped him out and he helped us out, and it was great.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, for sure. So kind of getting in the role of things, you're there, like you said, October, you get your first hunt in, you end up shooting a doe, and what happens from there?
So I didn't know when I was going to be able to come back. Casey and I both had Kansas tags. I had to film him, and then he was going to film me. My priority is I wanted Casey to kill in Kansas before we did anything. We've had a rough go at it in Kansas the last 4 years. Haven't been able to, we've been on deer, or for one thing or another, something happened, and, malfunction of the equipment, or just deer aren't cooperating. I mean, just hunting, and we just had a rough go at it. So I really wanted to get on a deer with him early, and then we could focus on Iowa for the rest of the rut, hopefully. Well, when we came home after that first hunt in Iowa, and I was hunting here in Michigan, hunting a pretty good deer here in Michigan, and I was just a step behind him and ended up having to leave, and I just kind of ran out of time with him. We ended up leaving, I want to say we went down there mid-October. I can't remember the day. It was mid-October. I want to say it was 14, 15, and hunted for a good 6 days in Kansas. Casey ended up shooting a doe. It was really hot. We ended up just saying, well, let's leave. I think we left around the 20th or 21st of October and came home, and we were only home for 3 or 4 days because we knew that week leading up to November was going to be a good one, we thought, and went back down to Kansas, turned around, went back down there, and started hunting. And the weather cooperated a little bit every so often, but just the big deer were not on their feet. I mean, what I mean by big deer is there was no 4-year-olds. We had encounters with a couple good 3-year-olds that we really wanted to see get through to another year. I ended up getting poison oak really bad. We hung a stand and I got poison oak all over me. I had to get some shots, steroid shots. And about November 1st, I believe it was, Chad ended up calling us and saying, hey, you guys should come up here. We're only 2.5 hours south of Chad. And he's like, you guys should come up here and at least give it a week because it is about ready to turn on. He's like, the big deer are on the move right now. And Chad is, he's out and about. He runs an outfit, so he's taking guys to stands, and all he does is drive around and scout all the time, all day. And Chad is, he is a big deer killing machine. He's one of those guys you probably won't hear a lot about, but he's got some giants on his wall. And yes, I know he lives in Iowa, but the thing is you got to have a little bit of knowledge as well to get on those deer. And he just has a knack for it. It's unbelievable what he can do. So he called and said, you guys should really come up here and try it out. And the big deer are out showing their faces in daylight right now. So Casey and I sat down. I think it was over dinner one night, just him and I sitting there, and we're like, what do you think? And I said, well, I'd like to go up there, but it's ultimately, what do you want to do? And he goes, I say we go up there. Let's give it 4, 5, 6 days and just see what happens. He's like, if it's what Chad says it is, we should be able to kill in a couple days. So that's what we did. We packed the truck right after we got done eating. It was late at night. We drove up there. I think we got up to Chad's at 3 o'clock in the morning on the November 2nd morning, so really early. Didn't end up hunting that morning, and obviously we got this property with no stands on it now because we literally got it a couple days before we went up there. No stands on it, no cameras, no nothing. There was nothing. We had no intel on this farm whatsoever. So the plan was from there was just to get on the maps and kind of go. We were going to drive around it look from a distance. We didn't really want to push in much. And my whole thing is I wanted to hang an observation stand, one that we could kill out of, one that we could see a lot and also kill out of. And we found the tree and went in that first night, November 2nd night, hung the stand and got right in it. And, I mean, I buckle up because it started really quickly, the deer movement, and some big deer came by.
So, Arron, when you guys, I know you said you wanted kind of that observation stand that potentially you could kill something. You guys were driving around. I mean, how did you end up in that tree? Was it just something where you guys could park and you're like, man, that looks like a spot where we can do both, or what was it based on?
So a lot of it was based on entry and exit. We knew the entry and exit was going to be dynamite. We weren't going to bust hardly anything out. We were on the eastern border of the farm, and it was a fence row that divided us to the neighbors, and the neighbors had some food. So if you can kind of picture, there's a road on the south side of the farm and on the north side of the farm, so we could come in from either way. So if we had a lot of deer to our north at night, we could leave south, or vice versa, and that's kind of how we played it. And we never put one camera out. I didn't really want to put cameras out. I didn't really want to I didn't want to move. I didn't want to put my scent around. I just wanted to get in the stand, see what the movement was, and then move accordingly if we needed to. Literally that was the plan. But what kind of made this tree appealing other than the access was that it was on the highest part of the farm overlooking this big CRP draw. So we could see deer there were some spots we could see deer for 800 yards away. And we were just so high, and, we thought that was going to give us the best vantage point, but also we figured there was going to be bucks cruising this fence row, scent checking the corn, the food on the neighbors, and, we thought we might be able to get one cruising there and getting one down. So we knew we were going to be in the chips and just move accordingly if we needed to.
Yeah. Well, I love what you said there, and I kind of thought that was the answer about the access. And access is such key. Being able, especially as well, getting two things. You're getting an observation stand and access, especially setting up on a new piece. That's one of the things, I really always look for is, how far can I see? And, kind of that equates to, what some of the deer, at least the deer movement is doing, and that's huge. But man, access is, as we all know, it's number one or number two.
Right. Yep. And to kind of go a little further with that, I agree wholeheartedly. There was nights that we'd go into that stand from the north, but had to leave to the south. So our entry and exit some days were different, which that's what I really like to find. So, back in my early days of hunting, I always thought it was like, you got to go down this trail to enter, and you got to leave on that trail. Well, you find out quickly that sometimes that's just not the best way to do it, and deer know, what you're doing. You're probably blowing out a lot of deer, so you kind of got to get creative, in my opinion, and that's what we had to do in a lot of sits.
Yeah, no, that makes total sense. But you guys picked that tree, and then, like you said, you guys are off and running. From there, it just seemed like all of a sudden you guys were in the deer. It was crazy and pretty awesome to watch, via the show on YouTube. Yeah,
the first night we got in there, we hung the stand and got right in it. We were in a cedar tree. Casey and I love to hunt cedar trees because the cover and the smell. I love the smell of cedar trees, and I feel like it helps with a good cover-up scent. We were only about 8 feet off the ground, maybe. And, we had some deer moving that night, and we saw, right at kind of the last light, I went maybe a half hour before, sunset, a giant came out. He was a double split G2 mainframe 10-point. I'd probably go in the high 160s into the 170s possibly. He came out, he's just cruising down in the bottom. The bottom down from me was, I think it was like 130 yards, and it was like it was one of those spines, one of those fingers coming off of the main spine, and he was cruising that, hit some scrapes. I was grunting at him. I would snort wheeze at him just to try to see if he'd come up there. and he would look up in our direction, but he had something else on his mind, and he just kept, walking, and he ended up walking. We watched him probably for a good 5 minutes walking down in front of us, and he just went down in that main spine. And I think the deer, when they get down in it, it's a pretty big gully. When you get down into the timber, it actually drops farther down. I think deer get down in there, and nobody will see them or hear them or nothing, and they can, like I said, they can go to that bedding and they can go to the food, and not a lot of people will be able to see them. So I think he got in there and was just like, well, that's nothing that he wanted to mess with. So that was basically night one, and that was, I'll tell you, I was excited because that's the biggest deer I've ever seen in my life with a weapon in my hand, and I knew in the next 7 days I was going to get an opportunity at a deer that I would never be able to have an opportunity at before.
Yeah, for sure. When I saw that deer, and it's like you said, really the first big deer on the show, but man, that deer is so impressive that when you see it, you're just kind of like holy crap, you know what I mean? Like it's like you could almost see the story unfold before it was that deer right there just kind of told you, like, you guys were already in the right spot, and it was just mixing and matching where to go from there and on the right day. And it just seemed like I said, that deer kind of just told me, like, holy cow, this is going to be really neat for the next couple days.
Yeah, and honestly, when you watch the video on YouTube, actually the first buck that you see before that deer, I forgot, there was a buck that was bedded. When we got in the stand, we hung the stand as this buck was bedded, probably 150 yards from us. And you'll see him, you can just see, like, his head and his rack above the grass. He was probably 140-inch, somewhere around there. 4-year-old, so I would have probably shot that deer. You know what I mean? I was just wanting to shoot a 4-year-old. I didn't really have an inch goal. It was just I wanted to shoot something that I know I would never be able to shoot here in Michigan. And when I saw him, I'm like, okay, that's a good sign. And then I saw the big deer. So, like, going back that night, I was thinking there's at least 2 deer here. We're good. We'll get an opportunity at one of these 2 deer. And not to mention, who knows what else is out there. Yeah.
No, that's for sure. Yeah, and like you said, you guys really didn't know, which makes it exciting. And, what makes it kind of telling, too, is that your buddy out there had told you, like, hey, it's going to kick on, and that just kind of tells you, like, the potential of another buck from a different area can move into at any time.
100%, yep. And we knew we were just in a big travel corridor, and we knew we were going to – I guess I shouldn't say we knew we were going to see a lot of deer. I just thought we were because we were in the middle of all of it. That's what we were thinking. So.
Yeah, exactly. And to me, that's one of the best spots, that you could ask for. I would really take a spot like that, especially that time of year, over anything else, to be honest. I really would.
Yeah, I agree.
Travel spots like that are unique,
For sure.
It's nice when deer have to come out and kind of check what's going on and see, get on their feet and check this field or that field and kind of, look for a little social activity. And those spots aren't always easy to come by.
I agree, yep.
So from there, I know that, Aaron, you guys just, kept it rolling, man. You'd seen more and more big deer, it seemed like, every time, another deer walked by.
Yeah, all the days kind of blend together now. It happened 5 or 6 months ago, but, it was every morning we would get in the stand, and before the sun was even up, that dark, like, kind of gray light where you could still see deer in the binoculars, but really hard to see, kind of, and really no camera light. We'd get up in the stand early. I'd pick the binoculars up, and there'd just be deer walking all over the CRP. Like, couldn't really tell what they were. They're just deer everywhere. And what I mean is, like, you could see, you'd turn to the north and you'd see a group of 6. You'd turn to the south and you'd see a group of 10. And then out in front of you, coming right at you, there's a group of 4. It's just crazy. And the next morning, actually, after the first night, we had that big, split G2 buck that we saw next morning from the previous first night when we saw the big deer, the, split G2 10-point. We got in the stand that next morning. There was deer all over, and little do we know, he ended up showing up behind us, came in from behind us, right downwind, never smelt us, got to like 10 or 15 yards. I got ready, couldn't get to full draw, and once I did, he was just had some limbs in the way, and I couldn't get a shot off or anything like that, and he just kind of walked out of our life. So I'm like thinking now, okay, saw him twice, had him at 10 to 15 yards, some limbs in the way, and honestly, I was thinking then, I was like, okay, something's going to happen. I'm staying here in this farm, not moving, and we're going to kill that deer. That's what I'm thinking. And there's deer all over, does, little bucks, and I saw a pile of, Pope and Young 120s, 125s, 130 deer, probably I would say a good dozen of them, different ones throughout the whole week. And, every sit was kind of a carbon copy of the previous. There was always a lot of deer, a lot of does, a lot of deer just moving. But within that, a different buck would show up every time, it seemed like. So, the next set we'd get in there and we had a big 8. I mean, a old deer, probably the older, I thought probably would have been the oldest deer that we would have seen. He was probably right around probably 140-inch 8, maybe, he'd be right there, but just a bruiser of a deer. We saw him a couple times with some does, and I was gonna wrap my tag around him. He was just a giant of a deer, big body. We ended up calling him Ted. He'd chase a doe out in front of us, and he'd be making scrapes and rubs and everything, and he wouldn't have anything to do with us. I would grunt, snort, wheeze, everything at him, rattle, nothing. He just did not want to leave that doe. So totally understood that. But one morning, the morning we saw Ted, we had a big 9, and I looked up over the ridge across from us, and there was this big deer walking up the hill, and ended up grunting a couple times, and he turned on a dime. I mean, he was probably 250 yards away, turned on a dime and came right to us. And he came to us on a steep quartering angle. I had to kind of get up. It was on my weak side of the tree. I'm a right-handed shooter, so if I was a lefty, it would have been perfect. But I had to stand up and go to full draw, and he caught me drawing a couple times. And then when, he turned to walk away, Casey stopped him at 35 yards, and I had the biggest branch in his vitals, and I just did not feel good with taking the shot. So, I mean, just about 2 or 3 days into it, I've had, 4 bucks that are meeting my criteria that I wanted to go after, in front of me, and I've had 2 of them within shooting range and not be able to get a shot off for one thing or another. So, I mean, the hopes are high, and the whole theme, going through the first 3 or 4 days was down in front of us with that spine, that finger that came off the main hub spine. There was a cedar tree down there. There was an edge, and all the deer, all the bucks were going by that cedar tree, every single one. So every time we'd have a shooter go by there, we'd look at each other and be like, we got to get a stand down there. We got to get a stand down there. But everything was happening, one thing or another, and we wouldn't be able to move it because we'd have a deer come in, a buck, and walk right underneath of us. And it's like, okay, well, we can still kill from this tree. So, every other set, it seemed like it happened that way. And it was like, why are we moving from here when we've got deer, good bucks underneath of us to go down there? So it was like one of those give and take things. And it was the pressure. I had a lot of self-inflicted pressure. I'm a very competitive person. So it's like, I wanted to do this. I wanted to wrap my tag around, a deer that, like I said, I wouldn't be able to take here in Michigan. So I had a goal set for myself. I had a lot of pressure because I didn't know how long we were going to be there, and I felt like this was probably going to be the only time I was going to be able to hunt the rut in Iowa for this year, because once we left, we were going to go to Kansas, and Casey and I both had tags. So we were going to sit there until, we filled those tags. So the pressure was mounting, and as every deer would get closer and we wouldn't be able to get a shot, it was just like, what do you do? So
I know that decision all too well, and it's like when you're in a good area and then you're like, why do that? And then you have that debate with yourself, and then you're talking yourself into it and out of it, and then it's going to be the worst decision or the best decision you've ever made. So I'm just relating, like, exactly, I know how that feels, and that pressure with every step and every thought of moving that stand just kind of gets really immense there for a minute.
Well, I agree, because what had happened, too, with that stand, we called that stand Tiny Dancer, and if you guys watch the YouTube video, you'll hear us refer to that stand, Tiny Dancer. And the thing is when you look at the weather, the wind was perfect for that stand the whole time. And we could hunt it on just about any wind, honestly, because the deer were coming from, I mean, you couldn't really guess where the deer, they would just show up out of nowhere. So scent control was a big thing that we had to, keep mindful, like always. And, it ended up paying off. But I had the 9-point come in again the next morning, and it was too low of light. I could have shot him at 20 yards, but Casey didn't have enough camera light. So, like, that happened. And then, so that was on day 5, I believe. And I think it was the morning of day 5. And once that happened, I knew we were literally only going to have a couple days. And I felt like we were probably going to be leaving. And later that morning, after that 9 left, I want to try to rattle something out of the corn behind us. So I did a blind rattle. It was just, crash them together, just see if we could draw something out of nowhere. And about, 30 seconds into the rattle sequence, the biggest deer I've ever laid eyes on, with a bow in my hand, bigger than the one before, comes bolting out of the corn at about 130 yards behind some cedars, and I'm just seeing his left side just running down the cedar row, and I could see it, and then he'd go behind a cedar, and I couldn't, and it was just white and really big, and he got to this opening and looked up in our direction, and I'm like, oh my gosh. I just kept saying, big deer, really, really big deer. And he's sitting at about 130 yards, and what I didn't realize is he had a doe in front of him as well. And she kind of ran and hid. She ran somewhere, and he stopped because he wanted to know what the fight and what the commotion was. So after she was out of sight, I felt like, okay, this is something that we might be able to draw him up here. And wouldn't you know it, he would walk right to that cedar tree down in front of us where we kept saying, we need to get a stand, we need to get a stand. He walks right down to the base of it. He makes a scrape, snort wheezes at us. I would, grunted at him, and it snort wheezed at him, and he would just snort wheeze back and would not come up there. So then ultimately he ended up walking down in front of me and going down in that main spine to try to find her. And then when he left, I looked at Casey and I said, oh my Lanta, that is a giant deer. And we both said right then and there, we're getting down and we're moving that stand. That was the last straw. We're moving that stand down there, and we're going to hunt the rest of the day in that stand. So that was kind of how we come to find out about this deer that we call the Great Hambino. That's when he got his name, and we moved right down there right away and got right in the tree.
So you guys, that was a morning sit, and you guys just basically, finished out your morning, or after you seen him and the deer kind of all got to bed, you guys decided to pull it down and you ran over there?
Yeah, we pulled it down, and we figured we needed to get in that tree because that tree is in the spine that he went into, and we were thinking that with the hot doe scent by that tree, one of those bucks was going to come by. But I looked at Casey and I said, I mean, I'll shoot anything that comes around that, that was of my standards that I wanted. But I said, I want to kill that deer. Like, that deer, he's here. And what ended up happening, in hindsight, is when he showed up, he kicked all those other deer out of there. Like, we didn't have a lot of time, but we didn't see any more of those bucks. And it was like he kind of went in there and ruled that roost. But we, pulled the millenniums down, went down there, hung them, sat it. And honestly, the rest of that night was like the slowest sit we had. We only saw about 4 does, and it got really windy the rest of the day. So it was a long all-day sit. But we were putting in long days. I mean, we were only coming out of the stand midday for probably an hour at the most every day. So we were basically sitting all day. And then gearing up for that was a Wednesday, I believe. That Thursday, that next morning, was supposed to be like a 28 to 30 degree drop in temperature. It was only supposed to be like 16 degrees or 18 degrees, something like that. So we knew that the deer were going to be moving. It was going to be a huge cold front coming in, and we thought the deer were going to be up and ready to go. So we were going to go back to that stand in the morning, get in there early, and just ride the hole and see what would happen, really.
Yeah, heck yeah. You cannot beat that's what I call like a mega cold front. That's a huge drop, and like you said, that's just something you have to key in on when the time's right. And if that's happening the next morning, I mean, what is greater than that you guys just moved that stand? It was kind of quiet the night before, and now you get this huge drop in weather. Man, it should be a good hunt.
It really was, and honestly, the best way to describe it, to kind of paint a picture for everybody, it was a west wind. And the only kicker to it was I was facing east, so the wind was hitting me in the back. All the deer that were coming by this tree were on the east side of the tree, so the wind would have been blowing right at them. But we figured that we could see them coming quick enough in front of me that we'd be able to get an arrow in one of them before they hit our wind. No deer were ever going on the back side of the tree on the west side. So we knew it was a gamble, but we had to try it. The best way I can describe the morning is cold as crap and frosty, and just you could see your breath. It was so cold, and you don't get a lot of those mornings. I remember having those mornings. I felt like there were more when I was growing up. Like the leaves were crunchy, and it was just that textbook morning. And we got in the stand, and I'm jacked. Like I am ready to go. And the sun started coming up in front of me, and I can see the Tiny Dancer stand, the one that we've been sitting in the last 5 days, up in front of me. And we ended up having a spike and a doe underneath of us in the timber to the right of us. I mean, probably 10, 15 yards. I think they must have either heard us or saw us, because they didn't run, but they kind of came out of the timber and started heading towards the Tiny Dancer stand, which would be straight east of me. And as they're going up the hill there, I kind of picked my binos up to look at them. Well, something caught the corner of my eye. I look up, and coming over the hill right underneath the Tiny Dancer stand is like 8 does. And I'm like, please don't be up there, thinking like that buck, the Hambino, please do not be up there, please. Because these does are literally right underneath the tree, like 10 yards underneath the tree. And wouldn't you know it, he pops up right over after those 8 does. So it was 8 does, him, and another like Pope and Young 8-pointer. And they're right underneath the tree we've been in for 5 days. And I'm like, and, you hear a lot of guys say it, you zig, they zag, and we sat there all week, and then they show up there, and it's like, I was so upset at the moment, but I'm like, okay, come back to reality. He's in front of me, kind of coming my way. So I'm like, this could still happen, because every time we had deer come under us on the Tiny Dancer stand, they would come down to this tree, which we called the hot corner. They would come down, and they would hit the scrape right underneath of me. So I'm like, maybe these does will come down here. And in my opinion, deer like structure too. So like they're out in the middle of a CRP field. I feel like they're going to go to the first structure, whether it's a big oak tree in the middle of a field. It's just deer gravitate to those places, and that's where we were. We were the first piece of structure from them. So I felt like they were going to come right down to us. They came to 80 yards. I mean, unbelievable footage. He's dogging these does around, lip curling, snort wheezing, growling, grunting. Unbelievable footage. There's so much frost on his back, and you can see his breath coming out, and it was unbelievable. He ended up coming to 80 yards, and then they bolted to the north of us, which would have been to the left of me, and went down in another ditch. Well, once they did that, all the deer, they left. We never saw any more deer that morning, and it was so cold. And I don't get cold very often, but my feet were so cold, and Casey was losing batteries. It seemed like every 10, 20 minutes because it was so cold. So we decided to get down for only an hour, go back. I had extra batteries at the house, get some batteries, get a quick bite to eat, and we were getting back in and staying the rest of the day. And that's what we did. We left everything in the tree. We actually had to take a different exit route than we came in, because he went to where we entered from the stand. And there's a pond where he went, and there's cedars around the pond, and the pond's kind of raised up, and there's thick cedars and thick CRP cover around the pond. So we thought, we even had the conversation in the tree, we thought he took that doe to that pond dam, and they're bedded in there. We had to believe that, because we had to believe that just to keep ourselves on point, just so we were, dotting our T's and crossing our I's and stuff like that. That doesn't even sound right. Dotting our T's, crossing our I's. I think that's how it goes.
That's right.
But we just had to have that mindset, so we didn't spook them out of there, basically.
Yeah, just to keep your due diligence going, and be proactive on the approach.
Yeah, so that's what we did. I mean, we looped way around, left everything in the tree, went back, came back in the tree. We got in the tree at 12 or 12:30, I think it was, and we were sitting there the rest of the day. And it was really cold. I think it was like 28 degrees, but it was like a warm 28, if that makes sense. Like the sun was shining real good, but it felt warmer than what it really was. And I remember sitting there, and when we moved down to this stand, our visuals went to virtually nothing. We were high. We were at the highest point of the farm. Now we're at the lowest part of the farm. So it's like you really got to have deer kind of on top of you before you see them. And we're sitting there, and about an hour into the sit, Casey had two does that went on the west side of the tree. So we never had any deer going on the west side of the tree. They came from the north, from that pond, and came on the west side of the tree, right underneath of us. And what we had done, because we were in a cedar, we had to carve the cedar out just to get the stands up there. We had took paracord and actually hung cedars behind us just to break up our outline. When they walked by there, I was not going to be able to get a shot because those cedars were there. We didn't have any lanes down there. And that's one thing Casey and I, it kind of cost us a little bit earlier in the trip, but we don't like to cut a lot of trees when we're putting stands up, especially during season, because just the less scent, the better, that we like to think. So we just like to carve little pockets and go from there. But these does came by and kept walking, and I remember having the conversation with them, like, why is there two adult does, not that it's so uncommon, but like by themselves in the heart of the rut. I mean, the rut is on. It is kicking. Every doe that we saw, I felt like was getting chased or getting bothered. So it's like, why is there two that aren't? So they walked off, and then about an hour later, Casey said, deer coming from back here, and it was an adult doe by herself. And she did the same trail at 15 yards, went right by us. And she had so many scuff marks on her back, like she had just got bred. She just looked like that. And right when she walked by, Casey goes, that's his doe. I'm going to guarantee you that's his doe, because she was coming from where they had went that morning. And you could just tell, like, something just came over you. You could just tell something was, she was with a buck, or, it just, all the signs I felt like pointed towards that. He goes, that's his doe. And then I was like, I cannot shoot over there. Why are all these deer coming this way? So we decided to take those cedars down, and was like, okay, we're just going to be exposed, and I'd rather be able to get a shot than not, than get busted. So she walks off, and we're sitting there, and it was I think it was about another hour. It was 3:30. And he said, hey, there's another deer coming from the north. And he can't see him because there's a big cedar to our north, and all he can do is hear them. And you can't see them until they're, like, right on us. I stood up and grabbed my bow, and he said, it's the great Hambino. And I looked around the tree, because this is on the back side of the tree for me, and all I could see was his right side. He's already at 20 yards, and he's coming right at us. So he had walked from the north going south, wow, like all the does did. But when he hit our ground scent coming, that's where we came into the stand. When we hit that ground scent, he took the ground scent and walked right at us with his nose to the ground. Really weird. So he came right to us.
Nuts.
Yeah, our ground set, we even said, was like, we got to clean it up a little bit. But he hit that ground set, came right to us. I went to full draw, and I'm in blackout mode. I remember now kind of the steps I was going through, but like at the moment, my heart, you could see it coming on my chest. I almost bet. And went to full draw, and I have a Garmin sight. So people that might not be familiar with a Garmin, you got a trigger on your handle of your bow. It ranges for you. So I hit that trigger, and it was ranging. And when I let go, it gave me a 17-yard pin, so that meant he was at 17 yards. For some odd reason, my mind did not register, and I'm like, okay, I kind of freaked out for a hot second. And if you double punch that trigger, it'll give you fixed pins. So it'll give you whatever you sighted your bow on for your fixed pins. I did a 20, 30, 40, 50. So I double punched it. My fixed pins come up, and then I kind of got like confidence back. I'm like, okay, we've been here before, you know. And I put my 20-yard pin on him. He took a couple more steps. I stopped him, and I shot him. And I actually got really lucky. One of my vanes hit a limb, and, you know, I got really lucky. And he ran up the hill probably 60, 70 yards, and we watched him pile over right there, and that was the end of it.
Yeah, that's amazing. And I know that you can, if I remember right, Aaron, you can see that arrow kind of kick like that a little bit, but luckily for you, it wasn't enough to really move the arrow, you know, and take it off target, but it did kind of kick your arrow, which I thought was like, holy cow, it just added to the drama.
It did, yeah, it did kick it a little bit, and honestly, I had about a little bit bigger than a basketball-sized hole there because, like I said, we didn't cut a lane through there. We didn't expect deer to come through there, but that was the last hole I had, and it was through a hedge apple tree, and where I ended up hitting him was actually, that's where I remember aiming. I don't really remember, you know, the arrow really kicking and going off course too much. I think it was literally just a nick. And, you know, I hit him, and it is a little high on that side, but he was so close. I think he was at like 15 yards when I ended up killing him or shooting in point of impact. And, I mean, it took out everything. He didn't go far, you know, and piled up, and that was the rest of it. That was it. Yeah,
no, he didn't go far, and that angle that you hit him and where you hit him is just so devastating. I mean, he took all of it in the right areas, and, you know, like you said, he only literally went like 60 yards, so he falls over, and it, I mean, for you, man, it's time to celebrate, and you guys can, you know, relax a little because you hunted hard. You went through all the drama of all these big bucks and trying to move on them, and it was really exciting how it unfolded because it was like, you know, it was just everything. You were in the right area, lots of big deer, and it was just putting the time in, and, you know, it didn't happen overnight, but that's what really actually made the story so good, and on top of that, you know, you killed just a once-in-a-lifetime buck, and from being, like I said, boys from Michigan, I mean, I can only imagine what you felt like when you walked up there.
There was a lot of a range of emotions in the tree. I can tell you, once he went down, Casey and I mean, hogging it out, like high-fiving. You know, Casey and I've filmed him for 8 years now, and him and I have been attached at the hip every fall for, you know, 8 or 9 years, and he's been fortunate enough. I've been fortunate enough to film him kill a 208-inch mule deer, 183-inch whitetail, 175-inch whitetail, and a plethora of other whitetails. And then he was able to, you know, film me shoot this one, and so it's just him and I have made a lot of memories over the years, you know, being able to do that, and it was just like, you know, the the emotions in the tree was just, for me, it was pressure's off now. Like I obtained my goal. Like I am done. The monkey is off my back, and that's just me, you know, with a competitive edge. And I always tell my wife, she always says, "Why are you so competitive all the time?" And I said, well, it's something that is instilled in me, and you can't turn competitiveness off, in my opinion. You know, it's, as I'm getting older, I'm not getting as competitive, but it's just, you know, if I go skip rocks, I want to get more skips than you know, and it's not that bad anymore, but it's just, that's the way I'm wired. And I feel like if you don't have a little bit of that, then why are you doing this? Because it's to stay competitive and push yourself and have goals and try to obtain those goals. Then why are you doing it? That's kind of my take on it. But I called my wife right away, and she's like, "Why are you calling me at 3:30?" And obviously she knew we were chasing the deer. Only a few people knew we were chasing that deer, and she ended up started crying, which in turn made me cry, which in turn made Casey cry. So we're crying in the tree. I mean, it was just a fiasco of things, and she was super happy for me. She, knows how much time I put into hunting in general, and she was just felt like she was there with me. So that was pretty cool as well.
Yeah, that's cool. No, very awesome range of emotion, and I probably could say with 90% that, guys from Iowa probably wouldn't cry, because that's kind of like, odds are in a few years that they could shoot one like that. And for us, it's more of like a lifetime achievement award, if that makes sense. And I totally get all the emotion, and, really glad that you guys actually had that kind of emotion, because it just is, it's real. And, really awesome, and I'm super happy for you, and it's such a great buck and such a great story. Arron, let everybody know kind of like where they can find it. I know it's on YouTube, but kind of give everybody the rundown on where to look for this stuff for you and this great buck.
Yeah, so there's a couple places if you want to hear the story, a little behind the scenes. A couple days after we killed him, Casey and I did a podcast on my podcast called The Fall Podcast. So anywhere you download a podcast, you can go and listen to that. I think it's episode 88, I think. It's the story about the Great Hambino. And we actually get into a lot of behind-the-scenes stuff, that the information, like right away, we killed him like 2 days before that. So we wanted to do it while it's fresh in our mind. So you can listen to that there. Also, go to YouTube and type in either the Kiefer Brothers or the Great Hambino or even my name, and it'll come up. It'll take you to the Kiefer Brothers _Humanimal YouTube channel, and it'll take you to the – sorry, I had someone calling me. If you go to the Kiefer Brothers _Humanimal YouTube channel or type in my name or the Great Hambino, it'll take you to our Humanimal YouTube channel. Subscribe there if you guys would, appreciate it. And then it's right on our playlist called the 19 series, Find the Great Hambino, and it's like 27 minutes long, but there's so many big deer in it and so many jam-packed like range of emotions and everything. You can see the whole thing unfold right there. So yeah, that's basically where you can find it.
Yeah, it's really awesome, and I'll probably end up watching it again this weekend, but actually on YouTube it says The Great Hambino and Iowa Giant 19 Series Chapter 7 Humanimal. So if you see that, that's this story, and I highly recommend everybody checks it out. And Arron, man, I'm super glad that we got to catch back up, and good luck tomorrow turkey season. And I definitely think the word of the day for the podcast was plethora. Have not used that in a while, and I'm glad you kind of brought that back.
Yeah, no problem. My dad, he says that a ton of times, so I think I just got it from my dad.
It's a great word. It's a great word. I used to say it all the time, so I'm glad. It's like one of those words you kind of forget that you had actually used. So.
Yep, exactly. There you go.
But awesome, man. Make sure everybody checks it out. And Arron, thanks so much, man. I hope you guys have a great season this coming year, and I hope that I'll have you back on. And I'll be headed to Iowa this year, so it'll be my turn, and hopefully, we'll have something else to chat about.
There you go, man. Well, thank you very much for having me on. I appreciate it. Love what you're doing with the podcast. And, yeah, thank you for letting me relive it.
Yeah, awesome story. And as you guys know, you can check us out every week on the Filtered Outdoor app, iTunes, and the Outdoor Podcast channel. We'll see you guys next week.